Hey everybody, welcome back to Z Frequency. I'm Andy Z. I have a very special guest I've been talking about for a couple days joining me today, Nathan Ciszek. Um, I'm really excited to kind of pick his brain. He's very knowledgeable about the way the system works, and um, we all need to be more acquainted with how this all works. So, Nathan, I'll just let you take away. Have at it. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you find yourself today?
Okay, great. Thank you for having me, Andy. I found you through Andrea Martin at
Yep,
Growing Up Alien, and
yep.
she was promoting your work through Facebook. And at the time, I just looked at a couple of minutes of it. I'm like, okay, he's not too bad. Last night, I got a chance to watch like I think two and a half of your podcasts before I had to go to bed. I was just beat. And I was really impressed with what you were putting out there. And you definitely need to be exposed to new people, and that means people to network with. So I really appreciate what you're doing. We thank you for your all of your effort, your work, and whatever sacrifice you've had to make. So thank you for that, because
Likewise.
we need more voices like you.
Likewise, I really am so impressed with everything that you've said so far. Everything that I've watched, I'm like, he's on it. He is absolutely on it. And I've watched before, but sometimes you have eyes to see it later times.
Yeah.
So I'm just really thrilled to have you on here. I'm happy to give you a
Well,
space for you to share what you know, so because this is such important information right now with
right.
where we are with everything. There's so much deception going on. So I would love to hear a little bit about your background for everybody watching, and then just take it away.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and I think the time for this information is now, because in the past we everything kind of goes in a certain specific order, and there's synchronicities that happen at the right times and so on, and you know about that.
Yep.
And we've kind of moved into this time period now where we've had so many of these deceptions with, the QAnon deception, the Trump deception, everything, and then this ongoing spiritual deception that I say, from what I can gather, has been going on since at least the early 50s, which is around the time when these treaties took place with these ETs, between ETs and the government of the US and Russia and others. So I think that the new age has been, and this is my hypothesis, but I've seen more and more proof, hands-on proof as well. I'm just relaying this information so people can use their own discernment. But I believe that the new age movement, just like all of the different movements that we've had, and I'll give you an example of another one, which was the hippie movement, the hippie peace movement, the counterculture movement. We know from the Laurel Canyon information that the music and everything else was essentially created and steered by the military industrial complex. So to say that the new age movement was the only thing that's been untouched this whole time, except for some spooks out there, I mean evil spirits and deceptive entities, is actually ridiculous, naive, and it's a well-wishing type of way of looking at things. And when you look at it that way, you become not just part of the problem, you become the problem, because they'll use you to perpetuate the belief system and the deception to literally everybody else if they feel that you're useful in that way. If not, you're just going to, and most people that get involved with the new age ultimately either kind of get to the point where it's not really of any use to them and they move on, maybe back to Christianity, or they go to atheism or something else. But it really destroys a lot of people and it ruins their lives, and they go on these type of spiritual escapades. But the worst of it is what we're seeing now with the manipulation, the Zionist propaganda being perpetuated by a lot of these influencers, and this ongoing disclosure deceptions. I can go on and on about that, but we'll get to that in a moment. My credentials are basically simple. I was a MILAB, which is a military ET joint abduction victim, since I was a child. It started at an early age. I think it started before 6, but I know that one of my abductions took place in 1980, which is, I was 6 years old. It was at the park down the street from my house. And I've had joint ET military abductions that took place early in my childhood. And then they seem to have fizzled out because I don't have the memories of the things that led up to each one of them. That those types of memories are not really present, I think, after maybe age 9 or so. It's hard to say, because they're really, really good at hiding this stuff.
Mhm.
And so I know that I've been in military custody for at least 2 consecutive lifetimes. And for some people, it's going to be a shocker, but they do, thanks to the ET involvement that is chaperoning these programs that they have, they can entrap your soul for multiple lifetimes. The ETs can, and they've been doing this for a very, very long time. And there's human soul trafficking involved in this and so on. And it's a massive human rights violation, it's a series of human rights violations. And there's as bad as you could possibly get, because it's one thing to take and, to take you physically and exploit you and abuse you. But when you're doing it to someone's soul, it's a whole new game, and it's much, much worse. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm completely agreeing. It's disgusting. Please keep going.
Okay. So, I was put through those abductions when I was younger, and I was also put through what I call a false awakening. Now, the military handlers that I've dealt with refer to what they put me into is a not just a social experiment for research and development, but also what they call an engineered lifetime. And what an engineered lifetime is, now technically we're all in an engineered lifetime, because we can't, the first clue of that is that we have amnesia. We can't remember our past existence, our past self. And we don't have a history of ourselves past 6,000 years. There's no recorded history due to cataclysmic events. So we're all essentially in an engineered world inside an engineered lifetime. But there's a bit of a difference, because this is directly hands-on. People who are abduction victims are in an engineered lifetime, because it's being engineered remotely by military MILAB handlers, as well as extraterrestrials that oversee them. And they could also be having direct extraterrestrial contact running parallel with the military handlers, if they're getting contact at all. The majority of the people that are going through this have no idea what's happening. They just can recount that throughout their life they've had subtle, sometimes profound psychic experiences, but they have no real rhyme or reason, and the person kind of goes on this mystery hunt, this, I guess you'd call it a quest for information as to why these things are happening. And they may turn to different spiritual beliefs on the way to that, journey of inner knowing. But overall, they're pretty much ignorant to the situation. So anyway, moving forward, I was put into a program where I was heavily suppressed. That means I was made sick, and this is starting from a young age. A lot of chronic health conditions growing up. When I got in my early 20s, I started having spinal problems, which actually originated, the first symptoms were back when I was around age 7, about a year after the abduction that I knew that happened. And it's not related to the abduction. They have the ability to remotely harm you and make you sick. They do something called remote neural monitoring, and they have other technology that can actually damage tissue and give you diseases and things of that nature without actually even exposing you to a chemical or a biological agent. They literally have that much control. So I was put through a heavy suppression program for research and development, and they wanted to determine what was possible with somebody like me in society. And I'm what you would call the original self, and the original self is the one that they abduct. But then they create soul fragments, which then they clone you and also genetically modify you and hybridize the clones so they can put your consciousness in it. So it's a parallel self. And it's just the way the nature of time works. Trying in the real true reality, linear time doesn't exist. And it's non-linear time. This allows for parallel lifetimes, parallel existences, and so forth. And so they can clone you and create a soul fragment to animate that clone, and it's you under a controlled state of consciousness. In other words, a much, much more intensified engineered lifetime. And they literally have 2 versions of you in the same room without a paradox situation taking place. So, and this is a lot of information to take in, so I'm going to try to slow it down a little bit from here on out. But I was put through a heavy suppression protocol. As a result of that, I was sickened, and I was actually given a lot of crippling conditions. I was put through employment suppression. Eventually, as I engaged in this false awakening that I had, I was receiving so-called spiritual contact. In the beginning, it was passive. It started in my early teens, and it went on. And also associated this contact with what I was getting when I was younger, because I would feel this incredible sense of fear and dread would start. And I'd be in my room at night as a child, and then they would come and take me, but I would never remember who came to get me. I would have a screen memory like perfectly spliced into that or over it, so that I couldn't remember what happened. I would always remember just being in my room, being scared to death, sweating, soaking my pajamas, shaking, hiding under the covers, but then nothing would come of it. But in reality, they were taking me. And I began to have dreams of being taken, but I never got a chance to see who it was. I would jump out of bed, run to the door, I would try to scream. Nothing would come out but air. And I feel like I was being held in place by this irresistible force that there was no way that I could possibly move through it. I could try as hard as I could, but there was no movement at all, and they could literally freeze me in my place. And at which point, at some point after that, they would come and get me, which I wouldn't remember because they'd take that and give me a screen memory. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying, I was put through a lot of suppression, a research and development project to see what they could do with me and how they could suppress someone like me, because I'm resistant to the mind control. And the goal was just to be able to figure out how they can synthesize certain personality aspects, which is a long discussion, but they can do something called personality rearrangement. When they create these alters through applied trauma and the use of drugs, they put you through a procedure in a lab where you're put through they administer a drug, and then they put you through kind of a virtual torture experience. In my case, the virtual torture experience was either insects like spiders, or it was dropping me off of high places like cliffs, skyscrapers, or things like that. So I would have to hit the ground and go splat and die, sometimes in an agonizing way because I wouldn't die immediately. I'd have electric shocks going down my legs. And this would repeat over and over again while somebody, an attendant, would speak to me telepathically and tell me, it'll all go away, Nathan. You just got to give us what we want. And what would happen is that I would eventually start to disassociate. And what they're doing is inducing basically multiple personality disorders. So they're creating an alter where the alter takes the pain and I step out of myself. So I have a memory of this, of being put through this. And at the moment that I remember, I wasn't being dropped off of a building, but this is the point where I was brought back in between those experiences, and they would talk to me, like try to coach me on and give them what they wanted, which was a personality split. Essentially, at that point, they can create a complete soul fragment or a clone of your soul that they can control and use to animate the clones, like I was explaining. But what he was saying to me is give us what we want. And as he was talking to me, because apparently this has been going on for a while, that I'd been in this machine, and what it looked like was, the best way to describe it, if you know, like a Singer sewing machine has a platform, a stand, basically a trunk that comes up, and then it has a part of the sewing machine that comes over, and then you have the needle, right? Well, think of this part as a platform, and you're laying on it, and you can't move. You're totally paralyzed. Your eyes are open. You can't shut them. And you've got all these bright lights hitting your face. And it's taking you in and out of consciousness into this scenario where you're falling off of a building or a cliff and you're dying. Okay, so that's all happening. And then they pull you back, and all you can see is you're underneath this machine. You're laying there. It's like an MRI or something, but it's bright lights. And you can't move, and it's this hard surface you're laying on, and there's an attendant standing next to you. So at the point that he's coaching me to do the split, I began to disassociate. And what I saw was that I was now standing next to him. I was kind of phasing back and forth until it kind of like became full on, and I was standing next to him. And that's what the split was. I moved out of my body. What was left in that body was the alter, which then they extract and they put me back in some way, or with whatever tech that does this, because that part of it, I don't fully remember. I just remember to have the knowledge of it, of what they would do, but yeah. I don't remember the actual experience. I just remember flashing from one position next to him from the position of being laying in this machine. Anyway, did you have a question?
With the So did you have a clone body for each altar that you had?
They can actually keep the altars inside your personality, but block it off.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if they don't need it, I mean, they can bring it out of you. They can turn you into your altar if you
Sure.
allow them that much control, because they're beating consent out of you. You know, the way reality works is you've got to give consent to even be trapped, to have your soul trapped in this reality. And as long as you give consent, you're going to be stuck and it'll feel like you can't get out. It's an illusion. But in the case of this, as long as you give them a certain level of control, which is subconscious layered contracts that come in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine until you start to dig into this. It's just from the mundane to the overt in your face type of agreements.
Yeah.
Just some of it could be the way you talk, your behavior, how you carry yourself. All of these things play you into their hand. So anyway, they can activate you. Yes, they do keep clones, and there's another thing that they do too that I found. This is for people that are in specialized suppression programs or specific programs that need this level of control. So I hope I answered your question with the altar. They do
No, you did.
multiples. I supposedly have around 297 different splits that they've created. They get you once, they take the split, the altar, they get the tissue sample, they make the clone. From there, they can create as many as they want. So it's not you going through it, it's another version of you going through this suffering. And each one of these splits is connected by basically a silver cord, a life force cord that you'd see in an OBE. That's how it's visually given to us when we look at it with the mind's eye or the eye of the soul. There has to be some visual feedback information. That's how it manifests itself as a silver cord. So it's a network of self. You think about it as each version of you is a node. Then you have the master node within this universe. And then you have the oversoul, which is a different silver cord that actually that's actually goes from the electromagnetic universe to the neutral charged neutrino universe, which is where our higher self or oversoul exists. It's outside of this universe construct.
Yeah.
This is why intuition works. And of course, what they're doing is they're hijacking our intuition in hopes that they can get access to the higher self. But they generally can't. What they get access to is essentially us. And then they just turn us into whatever they need us to be, depending on what skill set we have and how useful we are, how malleable we are, because some people don't even make it through the torture. They die in the process, and they become unusable. They recycle them back into to someone else in society. They mind wipe them, become what I call a tier 2 asset. This is someone that couldn't be used because they weren't capable of handling it. They weren't capable of being used properly. They may have potential, but it just doesn't work. So a tier 2 is someone put under, and these are also people they consider retired. They're put under a suppression protocol. They could be perpetually disabled from lifetime to lifetime, depending on the need to suppress. They could be mentally incapacitated, kept in poverty, put into homes that were just abusive and dysfunctional, and then steered into drugs and alcohol, steered into going to prison, driven to suicide, then recycled again. This is the type of things that they do to people. So that's kind of my background, but to give you more of it, to where I am now is what you wanted to hear. I'm a survivor of this. I've been able to do things that a lot of the people in the community can't, which is what I call oversoul integration. They focus on alter integration. I focus on who I was before I even came into this universe, into these lifetimes, into their custody. That's what I'm after, and that's how I can ground myself, and also connecting to God as well, which is extremely important. But you need to have that oversoul connection, because they can pretend to be God, and like they've done with me. I've had experiences that was their tech, and I thought it was God talking to me. They do call it the voice of God weapon. So anyway, I've been able to survive this crap and reach a point where I've limited their ability to access me which greatly limits their ability to target me using other people. But it's still possible, just not as easy for them. And in the process of all of this, because of what they've done to me, because of who I am, what I've experienced, I don't have any fear of it. So I'm willing to put myself at substantial levels of risk, no matter how bad it is, especially when you get to be able to, when you reach 52, you've taken control back of your life. You've got a lot of health problems associated with the targeting. And you reach the point that I have where you have to do this to help people, to help others, to break free from this, and hopefully limit their ability to affect us so we can institute change in society. That's why I'm doing this. So this isn't about self-preservation. This is about carrying out something that needs to be done, and justice needs to be had. So this is why I'm doing it. That's my background, basically. I know I've talked about a lot of things in that short period of time. So let's move on a bit. Do you have any questions at all, or anything that you'd like me to elaborate on with what I just said?
Well, I would love to hear about, because I think this could maybe help people. Is it a daily practice, or is it, what do you do in order to ground into your oversoul? What is it that's helped you integrate with your oversoul?
Well, I've had to do this through a suppression protocol, a specific program that they put me in. And so as the original self, I have a unique, basically, soul structure. I wasn't aware of this until the Full Disclosure Now conference last year in Florida. I knew I was going to be a speaker there, and I knew that there was going to be a psychic fair, and I intuitively sensed that there would be a psychic there that wanted to talk to me and give me a free session. So, but I wasn't looking for it. I just had a feeling this would happen. My mother went with me to the conference, and she wanted to check out the psychic fair. And I had needed some sleep, so because I was just exhausted, and long story there, but I had to get some sleep. So I slept in to around 10 o'clock. She got up early. Psychic fair, I think, opened 9, and she went down to see Anne Marie Morales, which is somebody I definitely want to get on my podcast. And discuss what happened between us and just find out her background, because she's one of the people that I would say that appears to be communicating with positive extraterrestrials or positive spirit beings of some kind. So she told me that I had a unique soul structure. I didn't have a root chakra. Instead, I had a void surrounded by a gold filament that looked like a bird's nest. Essentially, it was a weaving of filaments around a void, looked like a scrying mirror, just a hole, nothing there where you have a light, from the chakras, different colors, whatever.
Yeah.
This was highly unusual, and she hadn't seen it before, and she had to get information from whatever entities that she was communicating with. She kind of went into a trance, started speaking in tongues, and she came out and said, this is not a type of containment scenario where they've connected something to me in the MILAB program, because hasn't been seen in other people, but doesn't mean it isn't that. It's just that it just makes it less likely. But what she said is because that's what she initially thought. It was something kind of like a chain around your neck or something that anchors you to their custody. And what she came back with, what they told her is that this is part of my soul's structure. And they didn't go into it too much, because a lot of this is done, these interactions and plans for you come from outside this universe. So it's done in nonlinear time. So in what we consider to be a microsecond, dozens of individual entities, souls, or whatever you want to call them, have collaborated, came up with a plan, and have executed the plan in that split second. Because on that side, time doesn't exist. It's just pure presence and experience. Right. So anyway, this was all worked out, because obviously 3 months prior to going to the conference, I knew I was going to have this experience. I just didn't know how it was going to unfold. I just knew that I just had to go there and do my thing and not look for it to really find the right person. They'd come to me. And it took a while to figure this out. But what I figured out is that I have an unbreakable connection with my Oversoul by design, because I was put here in the situation, and have been put here in many situations prior to this, through various points in human history. And I need this because they can't get into it, and they can't fully control me. The goal of my entire life mission was to be taken into these programs after coming here in a previous lifetime, being put through all of this, overcoming it, and at the end, just before I get out of what I call the planetary consciousness simulation, I reach a point where I can withstand the attacks and I survive them and overcome them, and then use those experiences to help other people. And I expose as much as I can, because the goal of my life, or the fact that I'm here, was an intelligence gathering operation, combined with at the end to reveal a lot of this information to the public, who, if they can find me and I can get around the shadow banning, at least I'll be there to plant the psychological seeds of change and to help people. But it's also to send information back through this unique type of root chakra that I have, like a two-way type of communication system. So other intelligences can monitor me, including through my Oversoul, which they're working in a collective with my Oversoul. They can get information from my life experience here and every one of my altars they create, to gather enough information to have an effect in the future. And they're doing this with other people as well. I'm not the only one, but I'm the only one that I know of that's talking about what I'm talking about at this point in their timeline. And other than Olivia James, she also talks about handler networks. There's not many of us who have had an up close and personal experience with them. She's the only other person I know of that has had these up close and personal experiences and has learned from them, and she's been able to provide information for the community at large. So I'm also doing the same thing, but I've had different experiences and I got the information in a different way. Yeah. So I'm more or less the punching bag, where she's more like the spy, the psychic spy. I'm the punching bag that has to go through every miserable experience that they put me through in order to learn from it. And what I initially, because you go through a lot of self-analysis, it's constant. One of the things that I kept asking myself is, as I learned the importance of what I was doing, I thought to myself, well, I've let them get the best of me and deceive me. And I've been put myself through cults. I got involved with different psychological operations where it was centered around me, using other people. I've let people victimize me. I've had handlers that I've had to deal with. And I got involved in an internet cult, all of which to me at the time looked like I had screwed up. And in reality, I was following my intuition the whole time. And I thought they had hijacked my intuition at those points when I made those mistakes. But in reality, that wasn't the case at all. I was supposed to go through all of that. I was basically making myself bait and then going into these situations. And eventually, sometimes it took several years, sometimes it took 10 or 15 years, but I figured out what they were doing. So I'm here to reveal all of that. And thank you for having me. That's my background as best I can explain it.
Thank you for coming. This is your story is so, well, it's so important right now because there's so much deception going on. And what's so funny about that is my friend Katie Bishop always calls that unconscious reconnaissance, where you're in these situations that are terrible, and that intelligence is outside of our known realm knows what's going on with all this stuff, because you don't know until you're in it.
Exactly.
So really, I hate that you had to be the punching bag. That's the terrible part. But what you're doing is so important because, well, there's nobody realizes how widespread this manipulation is. It's the general public is being hit with frequencies and manipulation. You just happen to be much more aware of what's happening, really. So when you were doing all this targeting, what does that look like? What does it feel like? How would somebody know if they were being targeted?
Okay, well, one of the things that they did, well, here's what their strategy is. They want to turn you negative. They hope that you'll become someone that hurts other people, that hurts animals, that harms yourself. And in order to get somebody to do that, and when none of those things are in their nature, what they'll do is they'll do what I call thought injections. And this is a good example. You'd be petting your cat or your dog, and instantly you'll have this idea pops into your head of you breaking your dog's neck, or you're snapping or choking your cat, breaking its leg, doing something terrible to it, okay? And it'll pop into your head. That's an example of a thought injection, and that's through remote neural monitoring. It's one of their tactics. And you'll go through a period of a kind of a roller coaster with this. You ask yourself, why am I thinking these things? Have I been abused? I can't remember. You know, you don't remember anything happening in your childhood that would cause you to think these things. And these things started during your childhood. So you're constantly dealing with it, and they're constantly trying to push you in this direction. You'll look at people, okay? Now, we're all born imperfect. There's no perfect looking person. It's just we have genetic defects, and then the randomness of the way our genes come together. Some facial profiles, or just your physical body, are less attractive than others. It's just the roll of the dice. None of us are in control of this, at least at this point, unless we finally get to genetic engineering and we could pick what we want to look like, or kids, and change it. And these are what the ETs do. But I would look at people, and instead of like looking at the person in a neutral way and having a foundational love for them as another being, okay, instead of that, I would look at them. And of course, you got the societal programming, which is all part of this. This is what everybody gets, the negative societal programming, where you judge people by how they're dressed. You look at them like, they've got less money than me. I'm better than them. I'm more successful than them. I'm more attractive than them. And you have all of this negativity already built in that you've been exposed to since childhood. Your parents have instilled it in you, and they've had it put through, with them, nobody's perfect, your peers and so on. And I'd look at someone, and this voice would pop into my head and said, look at that ugly F and whatever. Things like that. And you start to despise yourself. You're like, what is that? What is that is causing this? So those are two examples of things. And then you'll have the voice that'll come in, and acts like your conscience. Like your conscience. This is how they start the false inner voice with you. You'll have that thought. It'll be followed up with the handler speaking directly to you in a voice that sounds like your own inner voice. And they can actually change your inner voice. I've had them change it to a female, where every time I thought I heard a woman's voice. This is the kind of nonsense that they put you through. But that voice would say, that's not nice. And this actually happened to me. I could tell you exactly roughly where I was. I was in Salem, Massachusetts. My son was around, 4 years old, 5, somewhere in there. He had a Freddy glove. He was in the Nightmare on Elm Street. We let him watch that stuff, and he became this Freddy fanatic. And he had this he had the Halloween, Freddy glove on. He was jumping through mud. Not mud puddles, but water puddles, because it was raining. We were right by the Witch Museum, and there's a little like a mini mall within these old architectural houses, and it's a couple of shops and a little sub shop in there. And we were going into the sub shop, and there was a woman that had a big nose. Other than that, she looked fine. And I just saw the big nose, and they injected something derogatory, and then to instill guilt, they had some voice say, well, that's not nice. And this began to happen over a period of time. And I started to believe that, because I've been involved in these topics since I was a child, I'm drawn to these subjects, is that, this was my higher self talking to me. So then they kind of built on that. And they build on that, and this higher self starts to kind of encourage you to go down this false spiritual path. And it goes from there. And then sometimes the voices turn into being ET or a spirit guide, and it just goes from there. And this is the type of garbage that I've had to go through. So does that answer your question? Or
yeah, no, I think that's
examples.
I think that's great, because I think there's so many people that won't understand that they're being steered a certain direction.
Exactly. Now,
go
the
ahead.
worst of it comes into what I would call, and this is the last thing, and then we can go on to some other topics if you like. personality rearrangement. This is the term that they used to describe what they were doing to me. And this happens, this can happen after you've been abducted and fractured, where they've created the clones, they've created the alters. What they'll do is they'll use I guess the best we could describe it as is a quantum computer system of some extraordinary nature that's extraterrestrial tech. And what this does is that they can edit your hold on a sec. Okay, my dog is scratching his side. I thought I heard somebody knocking, so I just have to pay attention to that. My son should be coming in any moment. He may be locked out, so I may have to get up for a moment. It looks like you're frozen.
Sorry.
Are you? Okay, what did you hear?
I remember where you were. You were at personality rearrangement, and it happens after you were abducted.
Yeah, they're watching this, and they're paying attention, and they're messing with you. So that's why this is happening. Personality rearrangement, and what that does is what they do is they edit your personality profile. Okay, so I call it a personality template. So me as the original self comes into this world. I've got a subconscious personality or a subconscious personality template that we're born with. You know, I don't know if you've got kids, but I raised a son, and no matter what I did to mold him the way I want him to be, he already had a personality. He already had likes, dislikes, and you can tell, especially with animals, when I get a chance to know them very, very intimately, and I help them work through, things like, from because I had a dog that had post-traumatic stress disorder. His owner that he had previous in a lifetime chained him to a fence and basically killed him with some type of a club. And he was very, very traumatized, and especially didn't like males. And I was the alpha male of the house, so he didn't like me. And it took 3 years to make that, connection with him. So you come into this world with a personality template already, but it's all basically subconscious. You don't know why you've got this baggage with you. That something has happened, but you don't remember because you've been mind wiped. So there's your baseline personality template. When they create these alters, each one of them has a personality template that they created. It could be pieces of other assets. So in other words, if you want to excel in training an asset that's kind of blank slated, you can take personality traits or skill sets from other assets using this technology and piece it together to create a personality template, so that your alter is a combination of attributes from the original self and attributes from other assets. This is one of the reasons why, it's one of several reasons why some assets remember going through the same memories, and they say, hey, you stole my intellectual property. You heard me tell that story, and then you had retold it as it happened to you. Well, it may very well have happened to that person from their point of perspective, from their memories, because that was given to multiple people. Could have been thousands of people have that specific memory that gives them a specific skill set, because the brain works this way. It learns this way. You need to have that experience in your memory bank, which is a perpetual loop of neurons firing, to give you the muscle memory and the ability to do these things. You're not going to be able to be a very good, exceptional sniper or have exceptional hand-to-hand combat capabilities unless you've been through the experience. You got to go through the training. They can put it into you like you have, and ultimately they're templating experiences and putting them into people, just like in the movie Total Recall. And they're talking about the ability to do that now with prison sentences. They can put you through 30 years and it takes 5 minutes, and you've suffered the whole 30. You've been through a virtual reality prison sentence, and they're talking about being able to do that. So this isn't so far out of the norm what I'm talking about. This is just what the military has been doing with people like myself for a long time, since the 50s. And this is a horrible human rights operation or violation of human rights. So you have the personality templating, and so they can create basically exactly the asset they want out of these alters. They're basically a blank slated version of you that's programmable. like a little gray alien's programmable. They're just doing the same thing, but in a different physical vessel. Okay. And then they augment that, and then they can create hybrids. As long as your DNA is in that hybrid, it could look like a reptilian or another ET. It could have specific genetics and bodily features and cognitive abilities that far exceed a human or even an augmented human, and they could create that as long as your DNA is at least a certain percentage of that. It completely meshes just like a computer network, like like an IP address with you, and it's still part of you, and it's very useful. So this is the level of tech, and they've been doing this to other species. The ETs that are running this whole show, and then they've infiltrated the military, the government, and this happened. And this infiltration is not something that's new. It's just been happening for eons of time. We don't even really know how long this simulation has been going on. This entrapment of this planet and the people on it, because this is basically an engineered prison system. Yeah. So that should answer your question a good bit. Do you have any other ones?
When you said the ETs that are kind of running the show, who do you care to ID them, or?
We really don't know. And you can interview endless numbers of people, and they're going to mostly point to the reptilians. Some will have names of different organizations and races. And you'll realize that when you look at all of them collectively, that some of it contradicts itself. So obviously, we're not getting the truth. And so no, I don't. And it's probably better that way, because if you learn something and if you take it to heart and believe it, it may not be true. You could discredit yourself later.
Sure, yeah.
So I was given, like for example, I was given a name of a race that they told me I belonged to, which was false, and that was the Hajayan race, a dark-skinned we were supposed to be close to 7 foot 8 or 9, almost 8 feet tall, human-looking. They described basically a Nordic ET, but with Polynesian features, okay, or Indian, a dark-skinned Indian type features. And with cat eyes and stuff, and that's an example of a group that may exist. It may not exist. It may exist. I mean, I'm sure there's people look like that out there, but are they called Hajayans? Well, who knows? And there may be another galaxy so far away that we don't even know about, that the ETs don't even care to know about, that where there are Hajayans, but they made it up out of, or they could have made it up out of thin air. And it was a way of interacting with me that sounded, for me, and it had something that I could grab onto. It sounded authentic.
Yeah.
Hajayan sounds like something. So what it is, I don't know, but so but it's mainly predominantly from what we've seen collectively reptilian, but it's not exclusively reptilian by any means. There's all sorts of different groups that are getting something out of this. There's the insectoids. The grays are some of them are used as biological slaves because they've been taken over, and a type of modified consciousness has been put into them under heavy genetic control and remote mind control tech to create a hive mind. So they have no real freedom at all. They're just workers. You've got that level of beings. You've got independent thinking, gray looking beings that are out there. And you've got human looking ones and so on and so forth. But what really kind of throws the monkey wrench into the gearbox is that when you realize that these are just body costumes, they're body containers, they're they're basically, the physical body is an EM electromagnetic cage for the soul. Yeah. So you can change that cage, you can change it to anything you want. And you can be, so these ETs can shed bodies and switch. They can be reptilian 1 month, the next month being an insectoid, the next month being a benevolent looking, beautiful ET man or woman, and you wouldn't be any wiser to that. So really you have to look at it from a soul's perspective. These are beings that are in service to self. Yeah. They don't have the, what people would consider be the Christ consciousness, that particular persuasion of thinking. They don't see what they're doing as being wrong, and they see it as a form of efficient self-preservation, and they have a corporate infrastructure. So, similar to what they've given us in various shades of it, But the movie Avatar is really just, what if we were to colonize another planet, and what would we do with our current mentality? Well, they've got the same mentality, and did much worse than what they did in the movie Avatar. I mean, we're talking hijacking your consciousness, creating spiritual prisons out of planets with histories that have been engineered from the beginning, with repetitive cataclysmic events that give collective amnesia. And then, of course, the mind wipe at the end of the life cycle gives individual amnesia. Together with that, you can pretty much reboot everything and everyone as many times as you need to. And what I've noticed is, and just this interesting before we move on to some other stuff, is that I do have a memory of living on a planet, and I don't know if this planet was a world in the electromagnetic universe, or if it was one outside of it, and in what I would call the neutrino source field or neutrino universe, which is the true baseline reality that I recognize. That would be, you call it a hypothesis, use your own discernment, everyone who's listening to this, but I've had real tangible effects and results in defending myself from this tech by accessing my Oversoul who exists in that reality and pulling energy from that reality to shield myself. So for me, there's tangible experiences that have greatly protected me and helped me in my life in the past few years. So for me, it's very real. For everyone else, it's just a matter of conjecture. It's food for thought. So I don't want to sound like somebody who's saying this is absolutely the way it is. I don't fully understand, but I do have an understanding of what I'm experiencing, just relaying it in an honest way so people can make a decision. So, but anyway, our reality has been augmented. This is a spiritual prison. It's part of a network of planets that they use. I call it a planetary consciousness simulation. It's taken me a long time to understand how this works, but the simulation basically goes like this. It's multi-layered, and the first couple of layers of the simulation are things that everyone is experiencing currently. First of all, you have the amnesia aspect of it, which gives you a blank slate to work with. So they can, for that point, if you think of a big tapestry or a canvas, they can paint whatever they want on it, and that's all you know. So you have the amnesia, you have the false science. This is now, because there's a conspiracy to conceal scientific truths from the public, such as free energy and a variety of things and cures, and just the nature of reality. They've lied to us about the conditions on the moon for the longest time, and then they started putting out more truthful information. Same thing with Mars. We've got all that data. We know they've lied about the color of the sky and the color of the soil in a lot of cases with filters. They've lied about the presence of water on the moon. They knew about it during Apollo, but they never told us. They kept us, it's a vacuum, it's dry, it's devoid of water. They gave us this very limited view of space when it's really an ecosystem that we're barely understanding because they've kept it all from us. And then, the nature of the soul, they've done all of these things and psychic abilities. Stanford Research Institute has been contracted to do lots of research. Some of it's now declassified on CIA.gov. We have a false, that's one layer of the simulation, false science. False religion is another one. I don't need to go much into that because every religion is competing and it's all contradicting itself. And then, that's a form of social engineering and manipulation by extraterrestrials. God is real, but the God depicted in these religions is an extraterrestrial personality, very imperfect, very sinister in many ways, loving in others. But of course, you need that, evil duality of, that just gives you this authoritarian figure to cower from and be God-fearing of because they want control. So they need to give us false religions. The reason why we're not under one false religion is because they need division. This is a perpetual form of basically giving, injecting stimuli to keep people fighting amongst themselves and believing in things that are self-destructive. So you have that. You've got the the limitations of the government to essentially we can't govern ourselves due to the external manipulation. We have no ability to sense others' intentions because we're psychically suppressed. So therefore, we can't communicate telepathically. which means we can be further limited by our government. And they've created a simulation of their own with big tech and censorship. People can surf the internet and they think that's the infinite source of truth, but yet it's filtered. It's filtered to push narratives and an overall agenda, which is a detriment to humanity. So there's multiple forms of suppression here. When you get into the more, we'd call it esoteric, or more of the real technical side of this, you know, we have multiple, we're in a nested consciousness simulation within this planet. We have a kind of a false spiritual realm that people experience when they have NDEs, when they're interacting with AI. There's people that are doing out-of-body experiences and exploring these realms. And the realms and the stories that I hear, they don't mesh with the experiences or the experience that I recently had, where I was able to see myself, experience myself 3 different places at once. And this was a promise that my altar gave me, that I would know how to get out of the death traps before I died. Being 52 with problems, I've had heart issues, manipulation with that. I've been put through, I've had long COVID that they induced for 3.5 years. They made sure I got it. They've done heart damage to me and a lot of other things. And they've broken and worn my system down, which all has a cardiovascular toll on you, with chronic pain and being chronically ill and sleep apnea and things like that they've done, and affecting my endocrine system. My body is not going to make it. So this is around the time, within 10, 15 years or so, when this is the last period of my life. So I got this information. It does not match with what these people are experiencing. They're going through these realms, these almost 3-dimensional type experiences where there's linear space, and it could be sublinear and more of a, like more of a spiritual experience too, but it's not what I see as the way out of this. It's just a way further in. So they create what I call the mimic field, which is what I've just described. So you have the void, you have the false realms after that, which are basically an AI interactive kind of like virtual reality experience for the soul to get, to experience. And then the goal is to contain you in these outer realms or these outer regions of the simulation that are all nested, and then to get you eventually back into another contract, which is to come back and be recycled. So everything needs consent. That's the design of our reality. That's the very design that God created the real reality, which I consider to be the neutrino universe or neutrino source field. It's based in consent. We have freedom with our limitations to experience it in a positive way, and which also directly correlates with our spiritual development as people and as entities that are loving and more godlike versus negative. You have more freedom when you're more positive and more godlike, which I think is kind of something we all realize as instinctual. But at the same time, there's these realms, these realities that are an electromagnetic overlay over the, because neutrinos are neutral. For those who don't understand what a neutrino is, it's a neutral particle. It doesn't obey any of the known laws of physics. It's basically can travel at any infinite speed, faster than light, much faster at the speed of thought, even faster than we could think. If there was a piece of lead, the thickness of the space between the Earth and the Sun, a neutrino could pass through that unrestricted at infinite speeds, faster than the speed of light, essentially reaching the other side of it instantaneously in 0 time. Scalar waves, incidentally, are the sister wave form to that particle, to the neutrino particle. And they have the same characteristics in a sense. You can send a scalar wave across an infinite distance in 0 time without any signal drop off. This is why Tesla was so interested in scalar waves. And I think scalar waves and the way they transmit is really the key to understanding wireless electricity. I don't think we're getting the truth of using the Earth as the conductor. That's because they're doing these experiments. You've seen it where they put the light bulbs in the ground and they send a charge and they're like, see, wireless electricity. Well, and nobody's done it through the air that I've seen. They've done it through the ground and they're calling it wireless electricity. But I think what Tesla did is he sent scalar waves from a transmitter to a receiver, where then it was converted to electrons. That would create wireless electricity with an infinite range, no signal drop off, and no problems with electronics, because you're not sending a charge, an EM, electromagnetic based charge, from across the distance. A scalar wave essentially is like the primordial wave of everything else, just like a neutrino is a primordial particle. It's what they consider well, they don't consider it the ghost particle, but it actually is. The Eric Hecker, for example, had this experience where, well, he has this, it's not an experience, not even a memory. He worked at the Antarctica McMurdo station, whatever it is. In his testimony, he worked on a neutrino detector that can also cause earthquakes, and what they were using it for, one of the purposes they were using it for is like it was a sensor type system that would sense spacecraft coming into our, either manifesting in our reality or just traveling through space and reaching our cosmic shores. Because when these ships travel, and then what they do is they kind of phase out of this reality. They go through a conduit of sorts, or a corridor in the electromagnetic spectrum, and then they're basically phase back into our reality, or you can call it whatever you want, but they phase back into our reality at the destination, so they don't go through the space. But when they do that, there's like a spillover of neutrinos. And the spillover of neutrinos that takes place is how they detect this craft. They know that they're coming into our airspace or surrounding space around the planet with this neutrino detector. They also use neutrino detectors to detect psychic spies in military bases. And there's plenty of testimony with MILABs that I've heard and personally talked to. Olivia James is a good example of this. She does this often. I've got other friends too who have been caught in these bases outside their body in an OBE state. And they've used technology not just to sense them, but to apprehend them and entrap them for a period of time, and then let them go. And just, to run them off, because these were assets. So they're not going to do something drastic because another program's using them. But they use neutrino detectors for this.
And
it's
I guess
also
the
about
psychics are discharging neutrinos when they're out of their bodies.
Well, the soul essentially is what I believe to be a standing scalar wave, which in a standing wave is two waves coming together, creating a static structure. Static meaning, in this case, eternal. So that's the memory of, basically a memory of God. A soul is a recollection of the Creator. The Creator thinks, it never forgets, and therefore you're eternal. So that would be a standing scalar wave. But in the process of this, and of course, this is a vague, very basic understanding of this, and somehow or another, neutrinos, which I believe are the particle substrate, if you don't think from physical terms, at least you need a substrate to create the scalar wave. So that would be the neutrino. So I think at the baseline level of just the components of the true baseline reality, it's all neutrinos expressing itself through scalar waveforms. So somehow or another, neutrinos are emitted and detected when somebody remote views a base, if they astral project, they become psychic spies, they can detect them. And also when a spacecraft comes into our reality, because the craft itself is made of a scanning scalar wave. This whole reality as we experience it is essentially physical because we sense it that way. So it's like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, well, God hears it. It still happens. So we're going above and beyond that. The animals hear it. But if you took all that away, it would still be the Creator making that happen, even though there was no additional consciousness as hearing the tree. So everything's kind of so basically reality is God's dream is the best way to put that. That was one of Whitney Strieber's, that was a quote from a Gray, and one of Whitney Strieber's books, Reality is God's Dream. And it stuck with me. It was just one of those things that made perfect sense.
Yeah. Now,
I also like to elaborate and add my little add on to that. I say reality is God's dream. And it's our role in this reality to pick up the pen of destiny and write the greatest story ever told, which is what we're trying to do right now.
I really love the way that you stated that. That was really great. And I
Yeah,
love this explanation as about the neutrinos and the scalar waves. This is what I think, because I talk about a false matrix that we are experiencing all the time. And you basically, the way you explain that on Rob's show, I thought was so brilliant, and that it embedded the electromagnetic law that you. I would love for you to expand on that right now, because I thought that was the best explanation that I've heard about the reality that we're experiencing.
Okay, let me give you a good, well, one good example would be the experience that I had to give people an idea what it's like compared to this reality. So I was going through a lot of targeting, and what you really need to understand is that, and I want to give you the framework, and then I'll give you my experience so you can determine how I got this framework, this level of understanding of it. Our baseline reality is being experienced by what people refer to as their oversoul or higher self. So what exactly is this? This is a lattice work of self, an infinite lattice work of light and self. I got a chance to see what mine looked like. It was a gold grid that was not perfectly square. It was like just an irregular lattice work, and each crisscrossing line, each intersection point was a version of me that was existing simultaneously with all the other versions of myself. This is all timelines and nonlinear time. Like I said, time literally is experienced completely in a different way. It's almost as if it doesn't exist, because I mean there's a progression of events, but they can be experienced in reverse. They can be experienced in parallel timelines, which is when you could say time goes sideways, because it's got more versions of the same event with different variables. So you can experience reality as the creator experiences reality through every one of us, since we are just simply an expression. Basically, reality is God's dream, so we would be an expression of the creator's consciousness. So the creator can experience every version of ourselves simultaneously, if it wanted to. So you get to be a piece of that, and you get to experience that in this neutrino source field, which is, and what this is, everyone, even atheists, if they may not want to admit to it, but most people will admit that they have a sense that there's a better place than this, that they've been there before. Some will say, I hope I've been there before. I don't have any recollection, but I feel like that concept soothes me. It feels right. So we have this instinctual baseline memory of self that we're trained through conditioning, through this experience, to forget. First of all, we don't remember how we got here and what brought us to the cosmic shores of Earth. A lot of people don't even realize that they may have been living out there at some point, but we don't have a recollection of it. And then we're told that these things don't exist, and we're told that we have five senses only. This is very physical reality. People laugh at you and they mock you and suggest otherwise. And then we're told about, well, there is a heaven. So they do give us a version of this neutrino source field, this true baseline reality, and it's referred to as heaven, which then they create an artificial space within this EM AI construct that we're in, the simulation that mimics what we think would be the perfect reality. So when a near-death experiencer experiences what they think is heaven, it's always catered to their own personal belief system. And it also greatly expands upon their personal belief system, and it shapes it usually in a positive way, because they want you to conform and go along with this and tell the others when you come back from your near-death experience, hey, it's really great over there. There's nothing to fear with death. Just go with whoever shows up and go down that tunnel, and you'll be there with all of your friends, your relatives, with God, and everything will be wonderful. Well, this is the deception. They're using the true baseline reality as the bait, but they're not giving you that baseline reality. What they're giving you is a convincing means of coming back to Earth. You're not quite done yet type of scenario. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, You are a infinite being in the neutrino source field or the neutrino universe. You're a individual like you are now, but you have the ability to experience all of this depending on what level of reality you're at, because it really depends on being closer to God, closer to the creator, more loving, less negative. And then you can ascend that way to the higher realities where once you get past what people refer to as fifth density, you get to sixth, the entropy ends. There's no life and death cycle. Everything is at a constant state. There's no need for the renewal state that, the rot and the rebirth and everything else. So that's the entropy cycle goes away. The simulation can't go past that because there's a bigger simulation outside this planet. There's the electromagnetic universe, which is a cosmic consciousness simulation. And this is what basically has been created to create an augmented experience, and it became corrupted. So if you look at this like from the perspective of the creation story that's in the Bible and a lot of religions, the creation became corrupted at some point. Well, the creation isn't just this planet, it was the electromagnetic universe. And electromagnetism, what we know about scalar waves is that electromagnetism can augment scalar waveform. It's just they interact that way. So what they've done is the engineers of this universe, which had engineers, I believe it was divinely directed, but at the same time, it became corrupted. And like I said, on the other side of this, there's no linear time. So this experiment, if you want to call it that, which it is very much so, it's happening in a very short span of time if we want to experience it from that point of view, or an eternity over here in it. This universe is extremely old, but that's in the linear time, because you have to understand there's nonlinear time and linear time. And linear time is necessary because this is an AI controlled system, is why sim theory is gaining traction. Scientists are seeing things, they're seeing anomalous facets of our reality that indicate this could be a computer simulation. Linear time is part of a computer's processing order of operations. So when you're altering reality in this way with electromagnetism, you're altering the baseline reality in the neutrino source field. You need to have AI to manage it. AI needs an order of operations. It processes events from start to finish. That's a progression of linear time. So linear time is absolutely necessary in the electromagnetic universe. It has to exist for the whole illusion to exist in itself, because what it is, it's an overlay over the baseline reality, meaning they've put in, and this is an AI term because it fits, they put in a guardrail, a series of guardrails, a framework within our reality experience that limits us. So in other words, they can create a universe that has limitations when compared to the baseline reality of the neutrino universe that gives us more of an accelerated form of spiritual development. So you could also take a planet, put it into a simulation like we have here, and if we were getting positively stimulated, you could put somebody into this augmented reality and they would grow as a soul potentially faster if the conditions were right in the first place than they would just existing in the neutrino source field where the reality is more fluid, because you've got greater challenges. You've got experiences where you learn things, you take them to heart. It's very powerful experiences where, and we've all been in the situation where something has gone gravely wrong in our reality and we're begging God to change it and nothing's happening. And we say to ourselves, I wish I could just blink my eyes and this horrible event would go away, but it won't. And you just wish you had that control in our baseline reality, depending on what level you're on. These things, negative, terrible things don't happen anymore because we were all in control of it. Anyway, what I was going to say is I skipped over something. I was talking about the repetitive cataclysms, just to kind of revert back to this reality.
Yeah.
I remember this planet had a different topography. It was big hills, mountain-sized hills, and everything was like genetically engineered. It appeared, which is what leads me to believe this is the neutrino source field at a higher density, where there was no biting insects. The grass grew at the perfect length. It was always the perfect temperature. You didn't have to sleep. You didn't have to eat. It was one of these realities, but it was one that felt like it was in total sync with God's will, and that you could feel God's presence, which was love, everywhere you just projected your consciousness. And you had full spectrum awareness of this reality and others. And I remember that. And it was a beautiful place. But what was different between this place and, one of the things that stood out is the topography. We have a very dramatic, cataclysmic, post-cataclysmic looking topography. The Rocky Mountains, the southwest of the United States, it looks like it was underwater, which it was.
Yeah.
So you've got this crazy landscapes, but they're all from these massive cataclysms. And this is what differentiates this planet from other realities, but also not just that, but from other worlds out there in, the solar system, not the solar system here. We've got lots of cataclysm here and just remnants of worlds that may have had some life on them and some that have very limited life. But in other worlds outside this and other solar systems, they're not going through the perpetual rebooting cycle of cataclysms. So the topography is much softer and friendlier. I just wanted that was a thought that I didn't fully connect to and actually go full circle with. So
no, that makes so much sense. It makes so much sense.
All right, so where are we? We're talking about, okay, so I got it. I'm going back to the experience that I had. I described what I consider to be the parallel universe that exists parallel to this one. On Rob's show, I showed a clip of a retired physicist from Lockheed Martin. I don't know if you saw my presentation that I did.
Yeah, there was something wrong with the audio.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I did it on another channel too. I did it on After Dark show with a friend. You can always do it here. I still have it.
Okay.
But anyway,
I'd love to.
That was really what I would have done at the Full Disclosure Conference if I didn't have the targeting. And of course, they didn't get in my mom's head and make her delete my presentation 30 minutes before I went on stage.
Oh, no.
So that I've got unfinished business with these handlers. So I'm going to do a presentation at some point, and even just one more. And if I don't, so be it. But I'm going to make sure I stick it to them because they sabotaged me, and I'm not going to take no for an answer on that one. But that's why I did it on Rob's show and a couple of others. I haven't rolled it out in a while. So if you want to do it here, we can always go through it.
I would love for you to. You're welcome anytime. Yeah, I would love to hear it. Yeah.
I also talk about scalar wave gates, which is those false doorways. I have a memory of the false doorway. And, I'd hold the thought on the neutrino here. I'll tell you about the false doorway real quick. I had this flash of memory of being in a type of priesthood position. And we were at one of these false doorways. And it wasn't in an arid place. I got the impression as I was looking at that one in Peru, that false doorway, and all of a sudden I got taken to a place and I had this memory experience where the place that I was at, I got the impression that it's now arid because of the flood. So this was post-Younger or pre-Younger Dryas, and it was more of a temperate climate. So we were at this false doorway and we were having a ceremony for the children, and families showed up and they put like a ground covering that they were sitting on. They were sitting Indian style in little groups, and they brought flowers as offerings. And it was for the children. They were introducing the children to the beings that came through these doorways. And I was one of the organizers, one of the clergy there. And we were all dressed in these white robes, even the kids. And then, the kids are running around playing with each other before the ceremony and everything. I didn't remember the ceremony part, but just the lead up to it. And I knew exactly what the context was of why I was there. And it was just pretty mind blowing. And this is what those doorways were used for. Beings would come through. Now, whether or not these beings were positive or negative, whether or not we were being socially engineered in false religions, no idea. It's probably a little bit of all the above. Because I know that after the Younger Dryas event, that was a big lockdown point, because that's when they brought the moon into orbit, and they staged not just the cataclysm from the moon, changing the Earth's axial tilt and spin, but you also had multiple impacts from space that they staged to create that mass extinction event that we consider, that they're now calling the Younger Dryas catastrophe event.
Yeah.
And that was about 12,500, roughly 13,000 or so years ago that they estimate. The pyramids were already built in Egypt there. I mean, so
Right.
what happened was, and this is something interesting about this, they've carbon dated the timbers in, I think, the Great Pyramid, and it dates back down to Khufu's reign, somewhere around there, I think, or one of the pharaohs. So it's in the last 4,000 years, roughly, time frame. And so then they're saying, well, that's got to be the date of the construction. Actually, what this was a repurposing event. The pyramids didn't have any type of markings on them because they weren't basically set up to be pushing a specific religion. They were more or less there for everyone, and they had this kind of anonymous look to them. They were plain. There was no real markings. It was smooth limestone. And that's why the older infrastructure, the older ruins, doesn't have any of this iconography that you get in later, like a later epoch. So what it was after the Younger Dryas event, they brought the moon, and that's when the lockdown, that's when the simulation gained a lot more strength. I believe it was a gradual progression. Once the moon arrived, that's when factions from Orion showed up, repurposed the pyramid, and it now became a mind controlled, basically used for mind control. It's a giant religious prop. It could do type of like light shows in the sky. It also, I have a memory of the Great Pyramid. I was standing in front of it. There's a stone road that goes, or pathway that goes. It's pretty wide, like a street, but it goes towards the center of one side of the pyramid. I was standing on it after the repurposing. It was very dry and arid. It felt like a night in Las Vegas in front of the Luxor. And it had that kind of like I felt this energy in the atmosphere. Just, you could feel it. It was permeating everything. It was a sense of awe and importance. And it made you want to acknowledge what this pyramid represented. It represented the gods. It represented obedience and unity with their agenda and their design of things. And you felt euphoric being in this area with this pyramid. And the other pyramids were there, and I just remember looking straight at it, and there was 2 arched palm trees, and I saw it so crystal clear. I must have had 20/20 vision at this point. I was probably pretty young, but I saw it, and right behind it, it looked like the Iron Maiden album cover, where it was a gold pyramid, but it didn't have the arcs of electricity coming from it. It was glowing completely gold against a dark night sky, and there was no external lighting like spotlights hitting it, because there's been reports in history that before the casing stones fully came down, at a distance, when the sun would hit the pyramid, it would look like it was made out of gold sometimes, the way the light reflected off of it at a substantial distance.
Yeah.
This was glowing because it was producing energy. And if you look at those little nubs that are on these megalithic structures, they can't figure out why they're there. Well, here's a hypothesis that makes perfect sense to me, and it goes and coincides with this memory. These are what you would call scalar wave transduction nodes. If you go into an amphitheater or a type of orchestra theater where they have classical music, they will often have architecture behind the stage that amplifies sound. It reflects sound back. The sound waves bounce off of it in a precise way where the room is tuned, just like these ritual chambers. The room is tuned to give you the best sound from where you're sitting at. Okay, so, and it's usually made out of foam and different things and different shapes. And basically it's like that, except and what that's doing is that's transducing or it's redirecting sound waves back to the audience. These nodes essentially transduce and transferred what is a nonlinear, non-Hertzian, which means non-electromagnetic, but it's also nonlinear. It transcends time and space. What these nodes were doing is they were distributing these scalar waves across a linear surface. So it's a nonlinear wave transversing a linear surface. So it's encasing the pyramid. It's creating the lightless, I mean, the sourceless lighting system. People say, how do they light the interior chambers? There's no torch marks. It's because the walls glowed. They produce their own light.
Yeah,
It's the same kind of light that a spirit produces. You know, when it goes, creates light. Well, and this is exactly the way it's actually doing it. And not just that, on the outside of the pyramid, there was a glow that was a couple of inches off the surface, and it was a golden light. And it looked like the pyramid was glowing gold in front of the dark night sky. It was a crystal clear night, and this one night that I was there, but it wasn't, there may have been some clouds, or it may have been the light pollution from the pyramid. All I saw was perfect black behind it, but it was putting off enough light to where you could literally walk around. And at the vantage point that I was, where the two trees were, I could have read a book from it. That's how much light it was producing. It was dim, but comfortable in the eyes enough to see.
Yeah.
And it was incredible looking in the way it made you feel. And that's because it was used for mind control, because it was releasing, what it was a scalar wave generator. It could be used for communication, and it can be used for mind control and for healing effects. It had a wide variety of uses. The technology that was used in conjunction with it gave it all of these different properties. So it can be used for positive things and negative. In this case, post Younger Dryas, post the moon's arrival, this was used by the Orion factions to essentially control the people in the region and make them engage in horrible human sacrifice festivals, horrible types of things and brutality. You know, I mean, Egypt was harsh living, and if you stepped out of line, they killed you. It wasn't this paradise that people were talking about. You know, people envision it could be. You know, it was rough living, but at the same time, you were constantly like a prison colony. You had these gods, and everyone had to answer to them. Not just you, but other groups, in other regions, and they would stage wars just like they do today, only on a smaller, limited scale, with people hand-to-hand combat and primitive weapons that they had at the time. But yeah, it literally was projecting scalar waves out into the environment, and those nodes and their configuration, because it's the configuration and the positions of the nodes that has something to do with how it's able to project these scalar waves, either out into the environment. If you were to do something where you want to keep the waves in the building and people would go in and have a healing experience, or send it right out of the peak, out of the capstone to communicate, you can do that. In this case, it was broadcasting outward into the environment to get everybody on the same page psychologically and emotionally, for obedience and control. Anyway, that's what those nodes are for. This is something that they're going to have science and people. I mean, I've given this information to people who research these subjects, and I've not gotten anybody to reach back out to me that actually seemed like they're like, that's interesting, but that's about all you get if you get any response at all.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, there's somebody that I remember asking about, and they did a whole show on all these nodes, and you're the first one that I've seen give an explanation on it. So if I see it again, I'll let you know, because there was somebody, and somebody was like, what are these? What are these? And it was a hypothesis. So if I see it again, I'll let you know, because you're the only one that I've seen give an explanation for that. So that's also fascinating to me.
And another thing too to add to that is in these military bases, they use shadowless lighting systems. There's no emitter that you can see. There's nothing you can see. There's a light system right there, and it's, you know, light shining down. I remember being rolled through one of the hallways of an underground base, and it was huge. You could put at least 2 tractor trailers side by side and then stack them one on top of the other too high, and you'd be able to fit this. It was aircraft hangar sized hallway that had struts in the ceiling, and the struts were painted like the military mud brown color.
Sure.
There's a lot of like earthy colors. They would have like completely white smooth walls, and then you'd have smaller office passages to where you would have smaller smooth walls, but then they would turn into like you'd have like a relief wall that would be natural stone. So you could see the bedrock and what it really looked like, and it'd be like a section of the wall just for the office space areas.
Yeah.
And I have memories that came through in a repetitive dream that happened for years and years, that I would be in this military base and I was allowed to walk around and go into the restricted areas as part of an experiment. And I would climb up, I would go to the lowest hallways that I could, and I would run and I would jump, and sometimes I could get up into the struts in the ceiling, and I'd sit up there with my feet dangling, watching people go in and out of the offices. So, it was something I did that I wasn't supposed to do. But I remember looking for the ETs, and I walked past this room. It may have been a jump room because it had a yellow kind of shimmering look like water, like the surface of water, but it had a yellow tint to it. And I could see people standing in a lab, and there was a screen and a long table that you'd find in like a high school laboratory with the sink in the middle and stuff, things like that, and equipment. And there was a screen, and somebody was looking at the screen, somebody was working, and I'm walking by. It could have been a jump room to Mars, or it could have been some type of way
Stargate everyone's warring over.
Well, it could have been able to that too.
I'm totally kidding.
I know. It kind of threw me off there.
Sorry.
But anyway, it could have been because it also could have been some type of way of creating a different atmosphere or atmospheric pressure or composition inside that room that the attendants in there needed versus the exterior hallway. It could have been that, or it also could have been a jump room where you walk through and you step into a lab on another planet. Yeah. I don't know, but it was something because I was allowed to walk the hallways but not go into the rooms, and I couldn't interact with anybody. I just had to stay to myself. Couldn't make any trouble, or I would lose the privilege. And they kept the other kids in cages. They gave me the ability to wander, and it had to do with them remote neural monitoring me and how my brain and energy patterns interacted with what I was experiencing. They wanted to know. They wanted to, because I was an anomaly apparently amongst the others. So they allowed me to do this, and they gave me a little white room to basically, I had a pad and a sink and a toilet. And that's about all I remember. There wasn't much there, but compared to the conditions of living in a dog cage and sleeping in a dog cage or a cell someplace, I was locked in, but I wasn't in a dog cage. As an example, I wasn't kept with the other kids. I was kept separate, at least in this experience. It may have only lasted a short period of time. It could have just been that particular alter had that experience as a child. I don't know. I just know that I was kept separate and monitored and treated differently because they wanted to understand. It has to do with the architecture of my soul and how it functions. They wanted to synthesize the attribute of having this unbreakable connection to the Oversoul. They saw it as a kind of a weapon, a way to make a weapon to where you could communicate with other assets outside of the electromagnetic spectrum, which prevents the enemy, whoever it may be, from being able to use their tech and their psychic abilities to detect what you're thinking and what you're doing, so they can't get your communications. It also allows you to gain information that they can't block. So you can get information. It's essentially a higher form of telepathy that would be very advantageous in any type of combat scenario or ambassador type scenario when dealing with other races. They had all sorts of ideas of how this could be used, and they wanted to put me in experiments. And then, of course, this also led to me being put through this suppression protocol and then tested to see how I would react, how I would fare under everything that they threw at me. So, but anyway, getting back to the other stuff I want to talk about, back to neutrino universe stuff. I'm going to set the stage here. I was sitting on my couch. My wife's on the phone with the mortgage company, and we're going through a financial hardship. I wasn't back to work yet because they kept me on a suppression protocol for a long time. I'm now finally back to work and back in the workforce, which is a big triumph. For most people, it's not. You're back in the rat race. You're just a slave, basically. But it's survival and stability, and it's something that they kept for me for a long time. It made me a burden on other people, which is, my personality is such where being put through that is just, it's unbearable, and I had to endure that. So back to work and everything. Anyway, At this point, I wasn't, and we were behind, and we'd already borrowed money from family, and we thought it wasn't going to happen again. But thankfully, things turned around, and we didn't get a no. We got help. Otherwise, we would have been homeless, and that would have been something worse and something I couldn't deal with because of my health issues. And I just didn't want to be living with anybody else anymore. I, had to rely on that to get through all of this in the first place with my grandmother. My wife and I had lived with my grandmother for a long time and went up taking care of her and getting the house, but we had to still got to pay for it. It wasn't paid off. So that was the situation. And I know, and I intuitively sensed that I was going to get bad news. And of course, you've been through all of this stuff. They try to make you suicidal. They've succeeded. And I've never tried to commit suicide. I've just been suicidal because of what they've done to me and the influencing that they do. Of course, the way they set your life up. There's periods where I was so health-wise was so bad, I thought I was going to die, or I hoped I'd die, and eventually I felt hopeless. So they put you through phases of where you just want to end it. And so here I am reflecting all of that, and I'm reflecting on the possibility that, knowing what I know about myself, that what I'm going to do, what I'm supposed to do in the future won't be possible if this happens. So at that point, I was thinking to myself, possibly plan B is hopefully, I die. My oversoul pulls me out. Worst case scenario, I had to take my own life. If that was the case, I didn't want to do that. But I'm sitting there brainstorming all of this, and I'm going through all of this. And that's when I find myself in another place. And I'm still on the couch, but I'm now in the future as well. So I'm having a split reality experience. I'm on the couch listening to her, and she just got the bad news. They weren't going to take the payment we had. They wanted 2 payments, and we didn't have it. And that was the scenario. So it may have been 3 payments or 2.5. I don't remember, but it was an amount of money that was several $1,000s more than what we had, and we couldn't pay for it. As soon as I heard that, I just into another reality I went, and I was experiencing it on the couch. I could hear her, feel the sofa and everything, but I was also someplace else. And where I was in the void after death, and I had no body, no physical body any longer. And what happens to MILABs is that when they die, what happens to them is that it's different from the average person, because the average person they're leaving their fate up to the recycling system. They die, they enter the void, they see the bright light, they get love bombed with a frequency that makes them feel warm and loved and comfortable, and God's there, and then it starts to mimic their relatives, the people they love and care about, their friends, their children, whatever, their parents, whatever's familiar with them, and they start to entice you in, and it's a handshake contract that once you take, you can't get out. At which point they put you through the life review, and then it's time for you to go back. You haven't learned your lesson yet. Well, how can I learn it if I can't remember? Oh, well, you figure it out anyway. Just go, and they give you the boot, and back you go. So here I was in the sit now with MILABs. It's different because people who have NDEs often are still aware that were just alive. They just died. Some of them remember the death experience. So that's all present in their consciousness and their mind in the void. And they know they're dead. They're just taking it all in. And then this light appears. With a MILAB, it's different. The MILAB gets hit with a frequency. The frequency makes you forget temporarily the context of your situation. You don't remember that you just died. You're just suddenly in a dark void. And then you get this comforting energy that comes through, and then the tunnel appears. And then it's enticing you in just like the regular one does, but you can't remember the context of self. So they're cheating our free will. They're cheating the need to gain consent from us, because apparently, and the way this works is that it's ultimately our responsibility to make a decision and make the right one for ourselves. And it doesn't matter if we've been exposed to BS and we don't know what the truth is. That's our responsibility to see through that with our connection to our Oversoul and God and whatnot. But it allows them to cheat us. So they cheat our perceptions. They take away our context of self, and then they entice us in. So they're overriding our free will through deception, basically, is what I'm saying. And the difference is, and I know this because it was something that I started to remember, but also I got it from a friend who passed, who's a MILAB, who died in front of his wife and was revived only because he heard her voice screaming his name, but he flatlined. And I believe the paramedics were there when he was dead, and he came back, he came out of it. And it was only because he heard her voice, because it triggered him to remember. And he was going towards the light. He said it was an orange light, and it felt like he was home. It felt wonderful. And he forgot completely about her. So this, when I heard his story, I already knew that it was true because I had remembered it, but that was confirmation. That was the evidence that I needed to coincide with the memory that I was getting and the intuition.
Yeah.
So they cheat us. And but the difference with this is that because I had done the work in the here and now, and that I had blocked their EM frequencies in the here and now, and I had broken free from all of the programmed belief systems, not just what society gave me, what my human experience gave me, but what the military handlers and their false awakening gave me. I'd shed all of that, which is the key to breaking free and gaining the ability to save yourself, comes from shedding all of that and integrating with who you used to be and connecting with that side of yourself, because you have to have the desire and the strong intent and a belief that it's real in order to do it. Because if you believe what they're telling you, it's just simply, you're not going to be able to connect like that. So there's another way out. We can talk about that. It's when the Oversoul decides that it's time to pull the fragment back out, and I'll get to what that means in a moment. So I'm in the void, and I have total presence of mind. So when the light appeared, it wasn't a tunnel that I saw, because I never let it get that close. I saw a distant light. It was like a whitish light, and it appeared and started to grow. And I developed an ability with shielding myself, where I emit a gold light, and it's the color of my aura. So I outshine the tunnel of light as a defensive and offensive form of defying it and protecting myself, at which point it didn't grow anymore and it stayed still. But I remember before I did that saying, as I first saw it, I said to myself, there it is. And I was reflecting, I was thinking to myself, and that was enough to convince me, because I remembered the context of the situation, that I had full coherence and I had full control, and I was in a different position than most people find themselves in, because they're in a state of confusion. And that's exactly what this technology is supposed to do. It erases your ability to reflect, and it makes you forget the context, and if you're MILAB, but it also, either way, if you can remember it or not, it catches you, and it catches you off guard. It's a state of confusion. You got comfort. You go towards it. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, yeah, but I guess would that be monitored by the AR system or AI system that they use through the EM, like to hit you with that frequency? I'm assuming.
Yeah, the extraterrestrials monitor all of it. I haven't even gotten into how they categorize, put us in the psychic families. We'll get to that right after this to help you understand. So anyway, it catches you off guard. You're in a state of confusion, but I had total coherence. I knew what was going on. And I produced the golden light that stopped it from growing. So it never formed a tunnel. It just the light grew several times in size, but then came to a total stop. Also, the other thing that I experienced as well is there was no spatial type of 3D environment. And when we have experiences, like it could be hallucination, it could be just a fantasy, it could be a psychological break due to stress. Generally, what we experience comes from bits and pieces of our accepted reality of things that we've already previously experienced. What I mean is that, if you were to if I were to conceptualize what the void was like, which I have done probably hundreds, if not thousands of times over the course of my life, I always applied the 3D spatial environment to it, because that's what I heard from the near-death experiencers. Yeah, I passed through a veil. I went through a vast landscape, and then I came to this, and then I got through this frequency fence or this veil and then I was in another reality, and they talk about it in a sense like, you can travel instantaneously. So it doesn't have the type of physical attributes of this reality, but it has some physical attributes, meaning it has structure and distance. And there's linear time is present too in most of these situations. And, or at least they tell it in such a way that it seems like linear time is a factor here. None of this existed in what I was experiencing. So this is a clue that what I was experiencing has validity to it because it wasn't based on things that I already knew. So if I were to hallucinate this due to stress, which was I certainly was under, but not to the level where I was hallucinating in any way, shape, or form. This was something I knew was coming. I prepared myself. I was just thinking pragmatically at that moment. I had multiple options, plan A, B, C. What was I going to do? And I just didn't know which one was going to work. And but dying was two of the options, either by my own hand or my oversoul pulling me out when things got worse and I wound up on the street or whatever the case may be. So it was all this was going through my head. But none of this experience was based in the reality of it or what I had preconceived it would be like. So there was no spatial reality. What I mean is there was nothing behind me because nothing could exist behind me. Everything that I was experiencing and seeing with my soul was what was there. There wasn't anything else. And it's hard to understand unless you've experienced it. But it's just if you
that makes perfect sense because it would be your viewpoint from your consciousness.
Right, and not with the body. And the body needs the 3D environment and this whole spatial reality. I'm going to pause for a moment because your video is frozen. You still there? Okay, there you are. I think we stopped on the spatial reality part because I stopped talking. We had that lag.
We stopped. I was actually running my mouth because you were saying nothing actually existed behind me. And I said, no, I think that kind of makes perfect sense because that's your consciousness perception. And then it cut out.
Okay, yeah. So we're on so it cut out for you the same time as it cut out for me. So we can get right back to where we were. So I didn't say much past that. But what I was saying is that the easiest way to conceptualize this or to understand is just it's pure perception. Whatever you see and perceive in front of you is all there is. So this kind of blew away some of the theories that I've heard people turn, the hypothesis that people have put forward, like the Farsight Institute. They talk about hiding in a pocket, hiding in a spot, waiting for the ETs, waiting for the rescue crew to come get you. Okay, and that is inaccurate from what I experienced. That would kind of just keep you in a fixed position while the tunnel of light would continuously harass you. And then you may actually get deceptive AI-generated beings that could come for you, or even military handlers in disguise doing an act. Because what they're doing is while I was in this situation, I could sense not only that I knew what the tunnel of light was, but I could sense that outside my perception, that I was under an augmented type of sense. I was having an augmented experience, and outside my perception, which I could sense, was an asset retrieval team. Because what happens is, and this is something that Farsight is pretty accurately remote viewed, they remote viewed asset retrieval teams. They didn't have the full context, but they said the military was involved. The personnel in this base that they remote viewed was actually, they were inside of a mountain, somewhere in an isolated area, like big, jagged, snow-covered mountains. And this was like at the top. And they were going through the side of the mountain through a portal, through the bedrock into the base. It's how the spacecraft got in and out. But they were doing an operation. They were using, they had cloned assets and ETs, Greys and stuff, and they were retrieving souls. And they would fly out the spacecraft cloaked to a location where they were retrieving someone. And I recognized what this was. This is an asset retrieval team. They generate the tunnel of light. So when my friend had his NDE and he saw the orange tunnel or the orange light, which turned into a tunnel, that was being generated not by the ET's AI reincarnation system. That was being generated by a kind of a smaller version of that tech on a spacecraft. And they were enticing him in with the technology, which then it entraps them. And a good book to read about this, there's two good books actually, by Truman Cash. He's a member of Project Avalon. And he wrote The Programming of the Planet, and he wrote The Eye of Ra. Both of those are exceptional books to read. He was working on a third. I don't know if he's published it or he's done yet. I have to reach back out to him. It's been a while. I've been on a hiatus, and I owe him some contact. Hopefully he's still with us. But he wrote these two books. You can find them on the Project Avalon library. It's Truman Cash, Eye of Ra, and The Programming of the Planet. He goes into these soul traps and some of the technology that he remembered through regressions. So, and how they entrapped things that he had experienced. But this was an asset retrieval team generating this. So I knew this was them, and I sensed it. So I had full coherence, full context of the situation. What I did is this point in time, I'm seeing the tunnel stop, and I produced the light. A portal opened up to my right, and I'm looking at, and if you just imagine a dark void, and just up to the right-hand side here, there's this perfect circle, and it's like there's light emanating from it. It's not lighting the void. It's just there's black, perfect darkness, black, and then a self-contained light in the form of a circle that's three-dimensional in appearance. It almost looks 2 to 3 dimensional. There's not much. It wasn't very. You couldn't see a lot of details. I saw 2 silhouettes in this round portal. It was my Oversoul and my soulmate. My soulmate is a woman in Australia. And this is another story altogether, but she came into my life around 2020. It was right around the time of the COVID toilet paper shortage. And we met under a Leak Project video, and it was Michael Lee Hill. And he was talking about his experiences and so forth. And he was a guest on the Leak Project with Rex Bear. And I started a conversation because Michael Lee Hill believes that he's Enki, because he was told that he was Enki and may have some memories. And there's a lot of people that are told that they're Enki or they've got memories coming through. So this is a common thing with trauma-based mind control, is giving people a false identity overlay. So there's only one Enki, at least, unless they put somebody into an artificially generated splinter timeline, and they put somebody in that role, which is a program that I've been involved in, not with putting people into the God, ET God role, but just putting people in ancient cultures. We can talk about that too, if you like. It's a short memory, but it's kind of profound. And so there's multiple explanations for why there's multiple Enkis and multiple Ras and multiple whatever, on and on. And we don't really know exactly what the case is in every situation. We can only speculate based on what vague memories or even detailed memories, because it doesn't matter how detailed the person's memories are. They can all be falsely implanted, or these could just be that this could be memories of a program where they lack the context of it and they think that it's something other than what it is. Anyway, it's still up to speculation. But so I'm gonna drink real quick here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm in the void. I just want to continue the story. I'm in the void, and this particular woman helped me break free from the mind control. And over a period of time, first couple of months that we interacted, something was totally different between us. And we both remember that we were actually, in the beginning, we thought it was just memories of past lives that we had been involved in together in a romantic husband and wife scenario. But it later turned out, and more or less that the majority of that memory came out through me. And eventually she acknowledged it because she was paired with a narcissistic person who became an inadvertent handler to her. And so she would be what I would consider to be a tier 2 asset. She was born into a psychic bloodline. Her father and her had psychic experiences. And she was put through a suppression protocol by pairing her up, getting her into the New Age religion a bit, and then pairing her up with a narcissist that she'd been abused by for a long time. So it was hard for her to acknowledge this until really recently. I mean, it was kind of hit and miss. She would acknowledge it and then kind of go back and forth. And we recently reached a breakthrough where she accepted this. And it really came down to trust. She had to know that I wasn't like him. And so she was standing, her Oversoul was standing next to mine, and we were observing ourselves. She was observing me as well as my Oversoul observing me, and also her own soul fragment that was projected into this reality. The impression that I got, Andy, is that it's the best analogy that I could give you would be if say her and I were standing in a lab and we were looking at a universe that was in the lab, and it would say was shaped like an egg. And in this egg were infinite number of stars, galaxies, all sorts of different proliferation of life. And it was then, and what they did is take a portion of the physical, of what you would consider to be the more the 3 to 5D physical universe on the neutrino source field, and essentially put an electromagnetic overlay over it, creating this universe that's inside this lab. And what you have to understand is not only does linear time not exist on this other side, this other reality, but space, three-dimensional space, is very fluid. So it's possible to have a literal universe inside a lab. It's all possible for all of this to coexist at the same time, is what I'm trying to say, because it's pure presence, it's pure experience. It's more closer to your infinite imagination, the mind of God just kind of unleashed, compared to living in this electromagnetic augmented reality at a lower density with the guardrails put in, controlled by AI. So it doesn't have the limitations. So that makes this possible. So let's say we're looking at this egg-shaped blob floating in the air above the ground of the lab, and her and I just glance into it and project our attention into it. And that starts our entry into the electromagnetic universe, at which point we seek out this prison planet and we're taken by the system. We give ourselves up voluntarily to be reincarnated into this prison type of system that uses deception to keep people in it. And we do it with a greater presence of self and a connection to our Oversoul, which ensures that at some point we're going to be able to remember and get ourselves out after death. And that's the escape. So this is what I sensed. It was exactly as I just described. And throughout my life, and this is the profound epiphany that I had, and how I knew this was true and this was real, and it pertained to my situation exclusively as well as hers, and really anybody else, which is why it needs to be told, is that throughout my life, whenever I watched or read books about near-death experiences or the afterlife, I would cry, I would get emotional. There were certain triggers just like that, but most of it had to do with another world, another existence, a past life, or just heaven or something like that. I would always get emotional. I would cry. I'd have to excuse myself or make excuses. There's times when I sat there and wiped tears away and act like I was blowing my nose or my eye was itching. And I always had this emotional response to it. And it was always the consistent emotion that I had over and over again, which I then, when I met her and this came out between us, that same emotion was connected to her. When I think of God, when I got closer to what God was and not what they wanted God to be for me, because they were mimicking God, and she was trying to help me with this. And she was like, why all of a sudden, if you went from being completely godless to having this connection, it just doesn't feel right intuitively for me. And she was right. They were mimicking God and I was having false experiences. It didn't have this emotional feel to it, like being around her made me feel, or reflecting on this afterlife that I was perceiving, this instinctual knowledge that there was another baseline reality that we were all meant to be in, not this one. And that emotional connection with that, well, that was the energy, that was the frequency, because emotion and all of that is energy, but it's also a frequency too. You can call it a frequency if you like. It's like a flavor of emotion. And just like a fingerprint or radio station, it's all very unique. And that frequency or that emotional energy was the calling card of home. Once I saw the portal and I saw myself looking back at me and her looking back at me, I instantly had that emotion welled up from the inside. And people talk about being hit with a frequency or just, they don't even use those terms generally. They say that they feel the love of God coming through the tunnel and their loved ones and everything, and they're hit with this, and it's all encompassing and it makes them feel so wonderful. That's coming externally. The key takeaway here is that it must come from inside you, because you It's up to you to execute your free will and to make the decision that you're going home. And you have to know where home is. In the neutrino source field, or the true baseline reality, you travel from point A to point B. You can walk through the space if you like, or make a car, or whatever it is, you know, use some device. But at some point, once you get to a certain level of existence, you can essentially will yourself to be there. You're changing your own frequency to match your destination, and you instantly, one reality fades into the next. So it's like, if I want to go to your house, it's like in Star Trek, you know, you kind of like flicker out. Well, it's like that. You basically, the view of everything flickers out, just kind of shimmers and flickers out, and then you're in the new place you want to be at. That's how you get out of this void. You have to know what home feels like. You have to make that connection with that part of yourself, because God's energy and your oversoul are unified, and that comes through. And that's your calling card. So I immediately recognized that what I was feeling from inside me, it wasn't coming from the portal, the tunnel of light, it was coming from inside me. And I connected with what I saw up in the corner over here. And what happened is I didn't travel through a space or go through a veil or a frequency fence. The void and the entire EM simulation flickered out, and I was instantaneously home. Those who were observing me in the craft, who were trying to get me to go into the tunnel using deception, their technology just saw me completely disappear from the electromagnetic spectrum. I was no longer readable on any of their tech, whether it be electromagnetic, or in this case, the neutral neutrino spectrum that they're able to detect too. I wasn't readable anymore. I was no longer in this reality. I completely phase shifted to my home, which is where everybody else originated from. We all came from there. It's that instinct in us that we know there's a better place. Like when somebody dies, they say, well, she's in a better place now.
Yeah.
Well, you can only hope. Knowing what we know, it's like, God, I hope so. But, you know, something tells me she didn't make it. I don't think, she didn't do the work. She didn't realize what she was stuck in. And for many people, they don't make the connection with God. They lose that connection and they become negative, and they just go with the programs. They become an NPC. Oh, well, we're bombing Israel again. Oh, well, it's just business as usual. What time do I go to work tomorrow? What time's dinner? What time's is Dancing with the Stars on? They're just caught in this rhythm. They're caught in this cycle of their habits, and they're not connecting with other people. They're not emphasizing. They're shutting off everyone. They're becoming more of an individual node in a network, and all of the connections go dead, including the one of their oversoul. So that's what really an NPC is. It's somebody that's totally lost touch. And for whatever reason, the oversoul has kept that part of them in this reality. They've kept them there because at some point, eventually, they're going to get out. But that, you know, the oversoul could pull them out, or they could go through a period of experiences where they come full circle and realize, hey, I don't need to be here anymore. This whole thing's an illusion. And I realized that this reality and everything that they've created, it's so rigid, so harsh, so impenetrable. After death, it's all just an illusion, and you have total free will to exit, but you have to know where you're going, and you have to know that you can. It's not up to them. It's strictly up to you. They just want you to believe it's up to them.
Yeah.
So
that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. Well, Nathan, we're at 2 hours, which it went by like a blink.
Okay. How about we do that one last thing? If you got 5 minutes,
oh, please do. Yeah.
Maybe 10. I'll try to keep it within 10.
No, you're good. Yeah.
I was involved in Project IBIS, but I don't know if this is an IBIS memory or if this is a memory of a sister program of Project IBIS, a sub-program or whatever, but it feels like IBIS. It feels the term and the concept of Project IBIS, in my mind, intuitively feels in sync with this memory. I do have my questions, though, and I've just explained what they are, at least in regard to its origin. And then I get another one later, which I'll explain. So anyway, this memory hit me. I had two memories simultaneously come to me. And it was interesting how this happened, because the Oversoul will show you things, such as I went through a period where I was seeing attachments on people, and I understood what the attachment was being used for, and I could see it in their behavior, how it was manipulating them. And I got an education as to how they use these AI generated, as well as AI controlled spiritual parasites that these extraterrestrials are using in the military too, in their control system. In fact, they've got programs where all they do is they manipulate the astral parasites to be used and controlled by AI. And then they use them to control assets and influencers and everything. And really, Andy, I actually feel like I've kind of let you down a bit, because we'll have to do this again. I need to explain how the psychic lines work. I need to explain how the influencers are set up, how they're groomed. I need to explain the entire framework of how this community functions and how it's being manipulated behind the scenes. My perception of it, which is consistent with other people that have been in this for a long time and can see through this. So that's extremely important. I was hoping to get to that. We'll have to do this again.
I would love to. Yeah.
I'd like to do it soon, because I've got the next 3 weeks off and I'll get back to work. So it'll be a little bit harder.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it next week if you can. Yeah.
Perfect. That's fine. We can do it. So anyway, I was in this program, and what it was is that I was a therapist and an analyst. It's like I thought you froze. So I was a combination of the two.
Oh.
And I had an office inside a house, and the houses look like European architecture. I can't determine how old they are, how long this was ago. It was in this timeline. I don't know what country of origin it was, but it didn't look like any like houses look. It looked more like houses look in certain areas of Britain or Europe, but I can't pinpoint where it was. It could have been, it could have been Cyprus. That keeps kind of coming into my psyche. Maybe it's Cyprus. I'd have to get on Google Earth and start exploring. And of course, I don't know how long ago this is. This could have been my previous lifetime, or it could have been this one, but it's one of my alters, either one. So my job was to take people, and this was basically a front operation. I looked like a psychiatrist operating out of a home office that had been commercially zoned in a neighborhood, and it just blended right in. But yet it was people in these time travel programs that were coming to me for debriefing sessions, and I would write or do reports. I don't know if it was, I guess it was verbal, written, whatever. There was reports being generated that I was responsible for. Psychotherapy had to, because people go through traumatic experiences. And what we were doing was the program was taking a person's consciousness, their soul. We were putting them back in time. And when you do that, you actually create a different timeline. The way timelines work is if you think of a branch of a tree, when you inject yourself into a timeline and you move from present to past or present to future, what you're doing is you're creating a branch off of the main trunk. And it's a parallel timeline where you're introducing something into it, and then it changes the direction. So what we were doing is we were researching the life experience of people in ancient times, and this included Mars. And so this woman was coming to me for these sessions, and we were going through start to finish everything she remembered across her whole lifetime. We had technology that could look through time and take the whole thing into a perspective. You can make a movie out of it. Whatever you wanted to do, you could take all the information, remote neural monitoring, everything. It was all there. So if you wanted to know what someone's stomach felt like after a bad meal on Mars in ancient times at the foot of a pyramid, you could do that with this technology. But they needed to have information from her perspective. Okay, so it was done all the data was collected in various ways. This was my end of it. So we would meet and go through these sessions. And in this particular day, we did our session, and I was out front with her, standing on the sidewalk in the neighborhood in front of the house where the office was. And this was a house that I would go to, and I'd lock up and I'd leave, and I wouldn't come back to it. It was just used for the purpose of this. So we're joking and we're having this humorous conversation about all of the crazy belief systems, the religions and the customs that she went through on Mars. And I was recounting my own experiences. I had been going put through the same thing, and now I'm on the other end of it as an analyst, and so I had a background in it too, and we were joking about the crazy belief systems, and that's kind of where the memory ends. And I just remember, I think she had like dark brown hair from what I'm seeing, and she's, a little couple inches shorter than me. I don't know what she was dressed. It was like a darker color outfit, but we were just having this conversation with her hands talking and laughing and stuff. And it was about the absurd belief systems. And we knew we had, and the context of the discussion was that it was the belief systems given to those indigenous people by their extraterrestrial handlers who were running the simulation. So we were probing the simulation on Mars, and that's why the iconography of Mars matches Earth. You look at the JPL images, you'll see Mayan ruins. You'll see that keyhole mound that's in Japan. They found one on Mars. It looks virtually identical to it, shaped like a keyhole. I've seen there's pyramids. There's stuff that looks Egyptian that's badly eroded away. There's statues that look like they're from Greece. It's the same religions, slightly tweaked because the people are taller, different facial features and so on, and different physical characteristics, but very much human looking, just bigger. But it was tweaked in those ways and then tweaked to match the names of the land and everything else. But generally the gods and the religious programming was virtually the same with some variation to it. So, this is why this stuff came to me so easily, I guess, because, the background that I had was researching or being part of the research project of understanding these social engineering programs of these false religions and customs that the ETs had bestowed upon their captive subjects inside a planetary consciousness simulation. Now, I had that memory, and then I had another one, which may have been part of this program, or it may have been a previous lifetime on Earth that was part of another life mission where I came into the cosmic conscious or EM simulation or EM universe simulation on Earth into this prison planet and had this experience. And this was and the reason I know this is because prior to me having these two memories hit me like a freight train, I was in the kitchen and my stepfather, who was visiting with my mother, and he's passed away now, unfortunately, but he was, he liked to come in and he would spend the night and he would sleep in a recliner. My mother would sleep in the spare bedroom. He would lay on the recliner and watch TV, and he liked to watch History Channel. So he was watching Ancient Aliens, and my Oversoul apparently knew that he was listening to this and used it as an opportunity to induce this memory in me. And what it was is there's two episodes that talk about this. And this particular region is near Mount Ararat. It's a valley at the foot of Mount Ararat. And it's a mass grave. And there's very little online about this mass grave. And it's brought up by one of the researchers, or maybe one or more researchers, in two different episodes. One was about the Great Flood. It was covered in that, and it was in one more. I don't remember the names of the episodes. But the guy was saying in the other room on the TV, when my stepdad was watching it, he says, and after the flood, they buried their dead in this mass grave for 10,000 years to pay homage to this man that had rebuilt civilization, that was credited for it, right? As soon as I heard that, that's when all of this memory recall hit me. Not only that I have the what I think is possibly an IBIS memory I just discussed with you, but this other memory came where my wife had died. And she wanted to be buried in this area, and I wanted her to be buried there too. And of course, I wanted the same thing, and so did everybody else. This was like a very special burial ground that reflected upon the sacrifices and contributions of this one particular man who was so instrumental in saving so many people and rebuilding the civilization, or at least the culture, it's more of a regional thing, but he was responsible for reestablishing the civilization or in this particular region after this massive flood. And people would carry their dead for days to bury them in this valley near Mount Ararat. So we carried this my wife, the dead, she was dead, obviously. We carried her for 3 days. I remember the 3 days. I don't remember what happened during these days, just a lot of struggling and sleeping on the ground and so on. But it was just, because I had the memory from the point of arrival, not the point of the whole trip. So it was a piece of it, but I had the context built into the memory as well. So I knew what I had been doing. It was 3 days on foot carrying this body, me and it feels like one or two other people. There may have been three of us, but I know there was two for sure, because the presences of the people with me was very one or two. It's all I know, but it wasn't a big part of the memory. So I can't remember specifically how many and who it was, but I know that they were close family. And we had carried the body there to bury her. And I remember standing in the middle of the cemetery and looking, and the mountains looked exactly like the pictures on Google Earth, exactly like the pictures that I found on websites of Mount Ararat and that little region around it. So it hasn't changed. So this was post Younger Dryas. The area was very arid at this point, just like it is today. And as far as the eye could see, there was these little piles of dirt with little sticks. Sometimes it was just rocks in different configurations, or bigger, smaller piles. Sometimes it was sticks. It could be an X, a cross, just sticks tied together. Homemade grave markers as far as the eye could see. And the emotion that I was having, of course, I was mourning and everything. But at the same time, I felt like I have fulfilled something very important between me and the person who was dead, which was my wife, and that this was a promise that I kept. It was very important to our overall belief system, our culture, and even our religion. It was all tied together. That it was an honor, and just to be able to have your final resting place in the same cemetery as this great man that was credited for doing all of these things. And he was from a previous generation, wasn't from the one that I was in. So he had been there for a long time, but there was massive amounts of graves. I mean, it was just, if you can imagine, you ever been in like California and strawberry fields forever?
I haven't, no.
Oh, I used to drive a truck. So I'd go out there, I'd pick up strawberries, some Driscoll strawberry and others all over the state. But I remember that song, Strawberry Fields Forever. And I got why they sung it, because it looks like Strawberry Fields Forever with these mountains all around it. It was just like that, but little primitive grave markers. And it was a very profound experience. I had a lot of emotion. I don't remember crying after this, but I was just like, wow. And I was taking it all in. And it was like a little bit of a, you get that lump in your throat, but I wasn't bawling my eyes out. This was something that, I remember, but it wasn't something direct, because most of the time when I cry from a memory, it's usually connected to what I was just describing to you. That memory of home, my soulmate, that's what's always gotten me. Because when I was a child growing up in my teenage years, one of the things that I always questioned was, why can't we remember our past self? Why can't we remember past lives? I never questioned reincarnation, because I had a memory of being in a lab in a soul transference memory, which we can get to next time. So I knew life after death, because there was life before life. And I always wanted, and I heard these concepts, there's a soulmate out there for you. I'm like, well, I wonder who she is. And I knew that she was out there, but I'm like, how do you find this person? Well, it turns out she found me. So I was actually set up to find her from the very, very beginning. And I'll leave you with just this last little tidbit of information.
Yeah.
I started a conversation about false identity overlays under that Leak Project video. And that video has been deleted since. Rex kept it up for a few years, and then he deleted all of his content and put it all behind a paywall, and then created new content to lure people to the paywall website, because he was trying to make money, and I guess he was experiencing declining revenues through YouTube, like everybody was. So he restructured his business plan on his show. So it's gone now, unfortunately. But this went on for about a week, and it was the longest conversation I've ever had under a YouTube. This was back when they didn't censor the comments, and you got a notification if somebody sent you a message and responded to your post under a video. So you could have a community experience under a video. It was great. They changed all that to control people and suppress discourse. So I was writing this, and it was about the personality overlays, and I talked about it, and then somebody came through, and one or two people said they'd experienced the same thing with ETs giving him a false identity overlay. And I wasn't too knowledgeable about the whole scope of it back then, but I had been through that cult called the Joy of Satan, which is another thing we can get into, the virtual temple complex, where mind control was used and false identity overlays were all over the place. There were so many different Liliths, and people had to like create handles where, you know, the real Lilith 666, because there's 665 other Liliths in the group, you know, and they're the real. Sure, it's in the name. So, but anyway, I started this discussion, and the first line, as I remember typing it, because it's still so present in my mind, my memory. I said something about the peanut gallery, and that's a term I never use. And it's a vaudeville term. It was when vaudeville, they would have like a little front row area where they would give the people watching the play peanuts. And if the play sucked, they'd throw peanuts on the stage. They call it the peanut gallery. And it was a vaudeville thing. And there was a show in the 70s, I think, called the Peanut Gallery. And that's how I knew the term. And then I looked it up. So I knew what it was, but I never used it because nobody uses the term peanut gallery anymore. Back when the show was on, you heard it. And back when vaudeville was going on, yeah, people used that term. It was kind of had a renaissance because of the TV show, which was like, from what I remember, it was kind of like the Gong Show. You did performances, and then you got kicked off the stage if you sucked or something like that. So if you remember, the Gong Show had, I think, a big cane, and they hit a gong or something and pull you off.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
It was like that, but more kind of like more gentle on the people failing.
Maybe a little more compassionate.
A little softer of a delivery that you screwed up. You know, like it. So, but anyway, I put that in the first line, and I stopped myself, and I'm like, nobody's going to know what that is, and why am I using it? It's like all of a sudden it just felt right that I needed to use it as a descriptive term leading into a discussion. And this little inner voice, it wasn't like somebody talking to me, because that's the false voice. That's the V2K or the ET's talking to you in a masquerading as your higher self, your intuition. It doesn't talk to you. It comes through as an inner knowing. It can be concepts and other things, but it doesn't talk to you. So anyway, the inner knowing basically said, leave it in. It's very important. So I did. Turns out she read that, and that was something her father used all the time, the peanut gallery. He would use it in his everyday speech. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
I sometimes get emotional when I talk about this. Anyway, I have to get my composure, but so anyway, that's how we met. She read that, and she immediately was glued. she was glued to the discussion. She read. I mean, the post was, if you were to scroll down all of the different abbreviations of the paragraphs of the discussion, you're probably talking 5 feet long, because it went on all week, and it captivated all these people. And she kept responding to me, like wanting to talk to me. And she felt this incredible intuitive push to establish a correspondence with me, which mind over matter here, which then led to us talking, eventually having a video call. And then from there, it was quite obvious that there was a very, very strong connection between us. So I think we should just leave it here.
Okay. Nathan, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Next week I'll shoot you a message on Facebook. We'll figure out a good day, but I would absolutely be thrilled to have you back. And yeah, no, you didn't do me a disservice at all. You've given a lot of great information, and people will have enough to digest until we meet again, for sure.
Yeah, and I hope this helps people understand things. But like I said, I really want to get into the actual structure of how this soul prison functions. Especially, I talked a little bit about when you come into the system and you give consent to be part of the experience. I really want to go from there, and by doing so, I'll give you a working idea of how the current situation is being pulled off with these social media influencers. It'll help you understand what you're seeing and why you're seeing it, and it'll make sense. It'll also help you understand what's going through these people's heads as they're being manipulated. And I really want to get into grave detail with that because I've experienced the same thing. It's just the only difference is that they had no intention of actually using me as a social media influencer. What they were doing was a bait and switch on my life purpose, which is really what they do with everyone. Nobody comes into this reality unless you're on their side to start with, comes into this reality with the intent of being this influencer, whether it be a Jesus figure or somebody doing a podcast. That's the kind of the spectrum. You got the Jesus figure all the way to the podcast. Nobody comes into the system saying, I want to work for the bad guys, and I want to just lead everybody astray and give out false belief systems and deceptive information and just screw everything up for it. No, that isn't happening. What they're doing is these people think that they're doing something positive and fulfilling their life purpose. So I want to go into all of that from my own experience. The only difference, like with myself, is they had no intention of using me. The goal was to set me up while I was totally compromised. It's like getting somebody to stand up out of a wheelchair and walk, okay? And then they fall on their face not just because they're compromised, but because the rug got pulled out from under them too, and they did a face plant. Because the idea is to hijack my intuition, take credit for everything that I was and was here to do, and everything that was going on with me. Replace God with their self, obviously, and get me to do something, get me to start something, and then be sabotaged by the very beings that were supposed to hold my hand and be my contacts, like you typically see in the community when people channel a certain individual or a certain grouping of individuals or entities, beings, whatever, or DARPA, for example. Like some people are just doing handlers. They think they're talking to ETs or spirit guides. But the goal was to sabotage me. So I would become discouraged and then back away from the whole spiritual phenomenon that I had been introduced to by these experiences, like they were staging to create the false awakening. This was a way of kind of getting me away from that altogether, where I would retreat back into my little hole and eventually just be not in their hair, not in their face, not a problem. So that was the successful goal of the suppression protocol. Thank God it failed, because if it didn't, I probably wouldn't be here, and that would mean that I'd likely been recycled, because I had to get to the point of a level of awareness before I could get myself out. And I knew intuitively to do that, and at the time I didn't realize, I just wanted to know why I was here, what was happening to me, who was behind it, and why they were doing it. And of course that led to the rest of it. But that they kept stimulating me in ways to sabotage me, and I was able to turn it around to my benefit, which pissed them off to no end. So I'll leave it at there.
That's always the goal, right? Knock them down a couple.
So
well, Nathan, I appreciate you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again. I've got a couple notes for the next time on subjects to hit for sure for us. And
awesome.
And on behalf of everybody that is subjected to this channel, we all appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, I want to get you connected up with some other people so we can network together and start injecting into this community, because you're out there doing it all by yourself. You got Andrea, who found you. I don't know if anybody else has, but that'll help you break some of the suppression. At least, people will see your channel through other channels. And I think you would really, I didn't say this earlier, before we started, you'd be great in a group discussion on the cosmic switchboard with James.
I'm open to any and all of it. Again, I'm just trying to help. I'm certainly not trying to get famous or make money off this or anything. This is really, I feel like this is part of why I'm here, is to try and snap everybody out of this. So
That's why you're right for this, because I wouldn't, I don't meet people that often that I immediately say, this person is right for this, because so I'm going to kind of ease you into meeting other people in the future, but it's kind of, I can't twist people's arms, and but once they see your content, they're going to say, so I think maybe in the future, you may be joining me on the Cosmic Switchboard for a group discussion, because your analysis is quite excellent from what, from your current level of knowledge and everything. You're able to see patterns, and you're able to see through these deceptions, and you're searching for the answers. So it's time to get with the people that have been doing the same thing, instead of just being out in the pasture by yourself. I'm going to try to help that happen. I'm going to try to help make that happen.
I would love that, and I appreciate you so much. I'm really looking forward to our next one. We'll set it up, and everybody will be excited to hear the next phase.
Great. And I'll also try to cross promote your channel. So a couple of days, whenever I get around to it, I'll upload. When you upload this, I'll wait a few days or whatever. If you want me to do it right away, it's up to you. I'll make a copy of it. I'll mirror it on my channel, put it up there, and I'll link to your channel, and try to help you out a little bit, because I went through a lot of good information here, so it'll be great on my channel too.
You really did. There's going to be a lot for people to digest and process, including me. So I'm excited about it.
Okay, cool, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to a new group of people, and thank you for coming aboard and doing what you're doing. And I hope to help you with your endeavor and try to make it. Like you said, it's not about money, and I'm not doing this for that either. We have a reason. We have something more important than money could ever be. Money is just a control system within the civilization that we're in. It's a system of debt, and it's the root of evil, because it's kind of like the energy that makes people do bad things. It's like the thing that gets them motivated, and it's one of the ways that they control us. And that's why I chose the path, which was so obvious to me, is to not profit from this, because there's little to be made anyway. And they can stick their blood money up there, what, because, I tried monetizing my channel just to see what they'd say, knowing that I wouldn't make anything, paid a couple pennies or something. Yeah. But they said I had harmful content. So what you just heard is considered to be harmful content.
It's so ridiculous. They'll do anything they can.
Yeah, if I was talking about Jesus in the right way, and it wasn't talking about Jesus wants to go to war with Iran, I'd be putting out harmful content, according to them.
Sure.
So
or the Black Federation.
No, yeah, exactly. If I want to tell people that the Savior's coming right around the corner, Trump is a Palladian, and so is Melania, man, and we got to go. Where we go one, we go all. We got to go and have a ground war and a draft to get this Stargate, because Zionists need this Stargate to balance the masculine and feminine energies of this planet, so we can finally live in harmony.
I just went on a tirade about that today too.
Good. Yeah, it needs to happen, and we need to call out people, but with tough love instead of slander, and do it in the right way, because in every case, this is a person literally on the inside crying out for help, while the outside's enjoying the fame and fortune, or the attention at least, but they're making a deal with the devil at the same time, and they're being used. And if they really knew what they were being used by, they would never be repeating any of this crap that they're being fed through V2K and other means. So we need to be there for these people when they crash and burn, so that they don't commit suicide, because once they realize what they're dealing with, they become a TI. Because they're no longer, because the grooming and use is completely, they have no use anymore, and now they're a detriment. They wind up in my category. You got to shut this person up, because they know our game. Yeah. My hope is we can get these people to snap out of this, and then join me and others in a chorus of voices to say, we've been deceived by remote mind control, whether it be ET or military, or it's usually both. We were used as influencers. This is a whole big program. This whole thing is just an engineered movement. It's a way to control leaks of memory and information, which translates to information for the public. It's a way to do that, but it's also social engineering, and it's a way to suppress a group of the most intuitive, heart-centered, good people who are here to do something, how do you shut them down, create a false awakening, and you engineer a community for them to be in where they never amount to anything, and the people on the outside look at them and laugh because they're making clowns of themselves. And that's exactly what they've done, and it needs to end.
Our sovereignty comes first.
Exactly. And sovereignty must be based in love, and love has to be the foundation and the motivator, not money, not fame, not ego, or any of these other things to get us out of this. And it's exactly the opposite, the opposite direction that they've taken us. They want us wrapped around, they want us intrigued by or entranced by money, ego, living more comfortably, whatever the case is. This is why these ascension narratives are so effective, because they make these promises and people are suffering and they feel that's the deliverance in a better way, and they're willing to listen and they're willing to lend their attention, and ultimately get sucked into the belief system, which only keeps them trapped. And that needs to stop too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to go. So it's been great having you all. It's been great being here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for joining. I'm excited for our next talk. You're a fount of knowledge. So I'm really excited.
And you have the ability to receive that knowledge, add your own in, and do something positive with it. So that's why we're doing this. And thank you.
Woohoo.
Power to the people.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll be in touch soon.
All righty. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye.